This is a Countax K18 ride-on mower from 1992, and this is actually not the first time it's featured on my channel. Exactly 2 years ago I set myself the challenge to try and get it running, and I did. However, it smoked quite badly. Since then, it's been stored under a sheet, preserving it in its own filth and rot. But it is now time to bring this machine back to its former glory. Join me on what is going to be an incredible journey, where we return this machine back to the early 90s. It's going to look like new again. At this stage you're probably thinking, well, this machine is so bad that it's just going to be blown to pieces by a sandblaster. And you'd be correct, it is literally turning to dust in many areas. Those parts will be replaced, so what it will be essentially is 2 bad machines turn into 1 good one. This used to be the fairly rare tool tray which lived underneath the seat. There's not much left of it now. Here is the first of the donor parts, the PTO assembly. So this needs to be disassembled so it can be sandblasted and powder coated along with the rest of the parts. Now I actually didn't have a deck for the machine originally, but I have managed to source this one, and it was not easy. These things are few and far between because they're always rotten, and even the one I found is rotten. So I'm going to have to do a bit of fabrication work to this one. By that I mean cutting out all of the rotten areas, then getting the correct shapes in the new metal, and then welding them into position, and then the whole thing can be sandblasted and powder coated. After many hours of work, the finished result looks like this. It can now be disassembled and added to the pile of parts. And that's all the parts disassembled and ready to be sent off. So from the donor machine I will be taking the center console and also the front axle and a few other smaller parts as well, because they were just too far gone on this machine. So what exactly is the history associated with this lawnmower and the company Countax? Well, obviously nobody can explain the origins of the company better than the company themselves, so I used the Wayback Machine to find an older capture of the Countax website in 2002. So the origins of the company date back to 1984, when the business was founded to make accessories for a manufacturer emerging as a leader in the tractor mower market. After this, their first development was a large diesel-powered commercial mower, which found a steady market with local authorities and commercial markets, and I actually do have in my fairly vast collection the brochure for this exact machine. And you can see it really is quite a beast. In 1989 and 1990, Countax restructured from being a subcontractor to becoming a manufacturer of their own range of garden tractors. With only 6 weeks to produce a machine ready for a major industry trade show, Countax staff worked around the clock to develop a prototype. And they made it with only hours to spare, delivering 3 models to their stand. The launch was successful, and they soon had orders for over 1,000 tractors. And this brings me nicely onto their 2023 website, where they actually do have this fantastic history page. Between 1990 and 92, the original K-Series garden tractor was launched. That is the mower that I am restoring today. The later K-Series was much larger, and that was targeted towards homeowners with a lot of land and contractors. On their 2002 website, they announced that in 1990 their sales and turnover leaped from 2.7 million to a massive 6.7 million. Between 93 and 95, Countax produced a new range of garden tractor, the C-Series, which kind of looked like the K-Series but more of a facelift version. Between 96 and 99, the A-Series tractor was launched. Between 2000 and 2005, this was the start of the noise reduction program with the new K1850 model, the newer, bigger, quieter K-Series. They were also expanding their assembly lines, with Princess Anne officially opening it. The first diesel tractor was introduced. They also introduced the 4-wheel drive version, and limited edition Williams WF1 600 tractor was launched. Between 2006 and 2009, the new X-Series range was introduced. I'm really pleased that Countax gave the out-front mowers a go, because they really are good machines, although I'm not really too convinced that their ones ever took off. They didn't seem to be around for very long. It may have been because there was already competition from other brands such as Stiga and Husqvarna. The new Williams Formula 1 Team 4-wheel drive model was also launched. 2010 was set with a change of ownership. The Ariens company from America acquired Countax. Also in the same year, the Countax Project running blade mower sets a new world land speed record. Between 2011 and 2020, the new Mark IV C-Series tractor was launched, and it really does pay its respects to all of the previous older models. It looks very, very similar, but obviously bigger, and it looks a lot more modern. And finally, they manufactured the Powered Grass Collector Plus cassette system for the C and B series tractors. This was a really good idea, because before, where you had to have separate implements for the scarifier and the sweeper, it all could just be slotted into the same main frame. So you could take the sweeper out and you could put the scarifying unit in. A great idea. There's actually something else I want to add to this timeline which Countax missed off, which I kind of find a bit odd because it's a fairly key event really. They were on Top Gear. In the final episode of the 20th season on the 4th of August 2013, they showcased the very best of British engineering. As the UK's leading manufacturer of garden tractors, Countax was approached by Top Gear to appear in the show. They brought along 3 Countax tractors, a C600H, a C600 4-wheel drive, and their diesel model, the A230D. This involved taking the 3 tractors from the Countax factory into central London. They drove them through Hyde Park and then down the centre of the Mall. So from seeing this huge success story, you're probably wondering what Countax are up to today. Well, it came as a bit of a shock to me as well, but the Ariens company that owns Countax has actually discontinued the production of them. However, they do say they're going to be very committed to ensuring everybody is helped out with machinery maintenance and spares. So that's something, but yeah, it is the end of an era. And this is another reason why I'm so dedicated to restoring this one today. Because you just never know when a company is going to go out of business, and one day every machine will be scrapped unless somebody is there to look after them. Let's continue with the restoration. Next, I need to disassemble the engine. We're now getting to the point where I need to get inside the engine, but before I can do that, the key needs to be removed from the keyway. And because it's stuck, a great way of doing this is by quenching it. So I heat it up and then I douse it with cold water and the key just pops out. I always enjoy the great reveal when you first remove the sump from an engine. You just never know exactly what you're going to find. And in this case, there's quite a lot of build-up in here. You can see exhaust gases have been getting past the head gasket and into the crankcase. Everything is very black. At the bottom of the sump is the mesh screen for the oil pump. And this is the governor on the camshaft. It's always worth making a note of the timing marks. You can see we've got 2 timing dots on both the crankshaft gear and the camshaft there. Very essential for when reassembling. So this is the camshaft and all the lobes look to be in very good condition, as does the compression release. And then down here we have the valve tappets or the push rods. To keep these in order, I just very simply mark a piece of cardboard and then pop them into their correct positions. Next, the big ends can be disconnected from the crankshaft and the pistons can then be pulled out of the engine. Well, this first one looks quite good, a little bit of scoring, not too serious though. And the second one also looks to be quite good. Before these are reinstalled into the engine, I will be fully inspecting them and making sure there's no issues at all with them, and of course they will be getting a new set of rings. But the first impressions are not really too bad. And finally, the crankshaft can be removed. So you really can see that it's all very stained in here. It should be a nice silver colour. We need to really clean things up. We're going to have to remove the bushing, and there's an awful lot of aluminium oxide on the exterior, so I'm going to have to sandblast them as well. But the first step is to remove the oil pump. Then I can put the sump and the crankcase into the hot washer. That will remove the top thick layer of dirt, and then after that I can use white spirit. The hot washer is great for removing the thick oil on the exterior, but it's not so good with the ingrained contamination. That's where the white spirit is fantastic. You can see the before and after here. And the final visual cleanup is with the sandblaster. This is to get rid of that horrible aluminium oxide, and this will make the sump look like new again. But of course, by doing this, it is introducing lots of grit into the sump and into the crankcase, so thorough cleaning is required afterwards. I use so many different methods to deep clean the crankcase and sump. I use brake cleaner, water, ultrasonic cleaner, compressed air, the list goes on. I just am always so concerned that something is going to get left behind, but it's well worth putting the time into it. The results speak for themselves. I'm now going to repeat the same process with the crankcase, and it does take about a day for each one. About halfway through, and this is what it looks like before and after. The crankcase is now sandblasted, but before I can go in with my super deep thorough clean, I'm going to hone the 2 cylinders. This video doesn't really do it justice, but it takes so many hours to get them to this stage. To finish off with, I'm just doing a nice good coat of heatproof lacquer to give them a really nice finish and so that they don't oxidize again. I'm now almost ready to start the reassembly, but before I do, I need to press out this old bushing. And to do this, we need to get the roll pin knocked into the engine crankcase. Unfortunately, I don't have the tool. Briggs & Stratton once made a tool for this, but they don't anymore, so I'm going to have to make it myself. The idea I've gone with here is just so you can put different length bolts in to cater to the application you're working on. It's a simple but effective idea. With the roll pin pushed back, the bushing can now be pressed out. The first part to be fitted to the engine is the new crankshaft bushing, and take note of this part because it was extremely expensive, and this is just the start of this project becoming unviable because of the prices of new parts. They are absolutely mind-blowing, and I will actually run through the cost of everything at the very end of this project. With the bushing pressed into the engine carefully, making sure it's all aligned, this roll pin needs to be fitted, but first we need to grind off a little bit of the end. It's time to start work on the pistons. Now, I always fit new piston rings to an engine when I reassemble them, And after a bit of research, I discovered that for these Vanguard engines, you've got to buy the entire piston assembly. You can't get just the rings. So let's remove the connecting rods first of all. The two connecting rods look to be in fairly good condition, so let's give them a quick clean so we can thoroughly inspect them. After an inspection, I discovered that there was actually a hole in the end of both of them. Now this might have been like this from new, but as it went all the way through to where the piston pin goes, I didn't really feel comfortable with fitting these. So I decided to buy new ones. And this was yet again another big expense. But you can see the new ones are looking so much better with no holes. We also have the new piston assembly, and they do look a little bit different to the original ones, but they are the same part number. So with the ring gaps checked, we can now fit the rings to the pistons, and then we can attach the connecting rod. If you look closer, you can see one connecting rod says out 1 and one says out 2. They do need to be this way because obviously they're fitted in opposite directions in the engine in a V shape. And now we can progress with the reassembly. It is just the complete reverse order of the disassembly. It's very important that everything is torqued correctly, so the first part to be torqued is the connecting rod big ends. If it isn't torqued within spec, then obviously too loose, the connecting rod could disconnect from the crankshaft, and too tight, it could cause premature wear. This is the oil pump, and you can see we do have two dots on the rotors. These need to be aligned at reassembly. If you're rebuilding your own Vanguard engine, then it is very important to remember this O-ring here for the oil passage. The sticky red substance you see me applying here is actually not the same as the reassembly oil. This is the Permatex high-tack gasket sealant. It's just going to make it much easier for the gasket to seal and guarantee there's going to be no leaks. And we're now ready for the sump, which concludes the reassembly of the internal part of the engine. Moving on, we have the 2-cylinder heads, and after looking at the crankcase and sump all this time, these really do look horrific. Hard to believe that the entire engine used to look like this. So let's fully disassemble these, we'll remove the valves and get them all cleaned up. These will also have to be sandblasted because they are just in such terrible shape, and it's the only way really of removing the aluminium oxide. I always find it so satisfying seeing what the sandblaster can do to aluminium. It looks so much cleaner already. So we're now ready to thoroughly clean this part in the ultrasonic cleaner, and then we're going to lap the valves in to make sure the valves create a good seal. And now the heads can be reassembled, starting with 2 new oil seals. It looks almost as good as new. So that can now be fitted to the engine, but we can't torque them yet. We can't torque the bolts because we need to make sure that the intake manifold and the exhaust manifold fit okay. With the intake and the exhaust manifolds fitted, the heads can be torqued in 3 phases, so we just gradually increase the torque each time. We then have the rocker covers, and the valve gaps do need to be set using a feeler gauge. There is an adjustment screw with a locking nut, and with the correct size feeler gauge in the gap, you then lock the nut in the correct position, and this will set the valve backlash. It's always nice to see a before and after. So the rocker cover is now ready to have a gasket fitted, and then that can go onto the cylinder head, and that will conclude this section of the rebuild. We can now start to build up the top section of the engine, and I actually did get some of these engine parts powder coated in a separate batch to the rest of the machine just because I needed them first. All of the electrical components in this top section were in horrific condition, so everything is being replaced at a fairly great expense. The air gap for the new ignition coils is 10 thousandths of an inch. So I'm just using the card that came with it, but you can also use a business card to set this. Finally, I'm building up the front of the engine, which includes the carburetor, the linkages, the governor lever, and the air filter box. I decided to stick with the nice red engine top cover. A lot of the Vanguards are actually black, but this is original and it looks super good. It also requires a new fuel pump. I quickly put together a new decal because you can't buy these anymore, so I custom made this one just to really finish it off and make it shine. And after all of that work and great expense, the engine is finished. As I said, I will update you on how much all this cost at the end of the project. But it is looking like a new engine. We now need to put this to one side though, because we do not have a machine to put it in. After passing a bit of time watching the squirrels being very mischievous in the garden, the powder coated parts are now ready. And look at all this. What a transformation over what they used to be. So I can now begin the huge job of reassembling this tractor mower. And it's quite a complicated one. So I laid out my sheet and I was about to start. But then who should arrive but quality control? Personally, I think they're very impressed as well with how it all came out. Oh, Mrs. Duck, you dirty thing. Oh no, they're going in the shed. They're going to find the rest of the parts. That will only excite them further. Well, it looks like I passed the inspection. They're on their way out again. I'm sure they'll be sending me their report in a few days. Let me just clean up Mrs. Duck's present and we'll continue with the reassembly. It all starts with this linkage, and before we can do anything we need to press the bushing into it. We then have the drive pedal clutch, and once again it is all the reverse procedure of the disassembly from here. Before the front axle can be fitted, the 4 bearings need to be pressed into the ends. We're now ready for the track rod, but unfortunately the original one was all bent, and a new one is a ridiculous £60. So that's not happening. Let's make our own. Next is the PTO, so we just need to press in some new bearings and the shaft, and then that can be fitted to the chassis. The tractor is almost ready to sit on its own wheels, but before we can do that we do need to attach the gearbox, and of course the gearbox currently looks like this. So I've actually done a full disassembly, cleanup and rebuild of one of these gearboxes many times before, and if you want to see this happening, check out my Westwood W16 restoration, but this is what it looks like once it has been finished. The gearbox can now be fitted to the machine. The original deflector guard which sits underneath the gearbox was actually in very bad shape, so I managed to source another one which doesn't look exactly the same, but it's still not bad, and I've had that powder coated. So I need to cut a strip of rubber to fit onto this, and then this whole assembly can fit onto the underside of the gearbox. We just have a few final linkages to fit before the mower can be uprighted. The front wheel rims need 2 bearings each, and then they can have their new tyres fitted onto them. Now for the rear wheels, these do not take any bearings, they just slide directly onto the gearbox shaft. And there we have 4 completed wheels, ready to be fitted, and for the machine to become a rolling chassis. With the majority of the reassembly work completed on the underside of the machine, we can now move to the top to do parts such as the centre console. As the whole of the steering system was in extremely bad shape, everything here is being replaced, such as the steering quadrant and the pinion gear. We now not only have a rolling chassis, but we have a steerable rolling chassis. Progress. I'm going to try my best to keep the electrical system as tidy as possible. It does help that the solenoid is actually tucked away underneath, although the location isn't so good in the future if it breaks and you need to change it, because it's not very accessible. Moving on to the rear linkage now, we actually don't need it for this particular project because I don't have a rear sweeper assembly for it, but I'm fitting it anyway to make it look complete and so that it can take a sweeper in the future. Here's how the project is coming along. We're almost there. I have managed to source a replacement steering wheel for it, but it does need a quick sandblast and repaint. Now we need somewhere to sit. As the seat was long gone, and there was no point in sourcing another one which had rips in it, I'm just fitting a brand new seat. The same applies for the fuel tank. You just can't beat that nice, fresh, clean look of a new fuel tank. Oh, by the way, do you remember this really old rotten tool tray that was in the machine? Well, I've managed to find another one, and these really are hard to come by, so I don't know how I did it, but it was just amazing luck. Okay, you know what we need? Decals. Now, you can't buy the decals anymore, so I'm making my own. What I've done is I've measured them all up, I've scanned them in, and I'm recreating them on a piece of software called Affinity Designer. You can also use something like Photoshop. But once they're all redrawn, I send them off to a professional printing company. They print vinyl, and this is the final result. Let's get them applied to the machine. Decals really do finish off a machine. You might say they're the icing on the cake. Okay, we need to move on. We need to get things prepared for the engine. So we just have the front hanger bar for the deck. This needs to go on first because the muffler assembly is going to go into this area. And then I can lift the engine into position. As is the case with most things on the machine, I am fitting a brand new muffler. So before I can actually fit this, I just need to thread a couple of holes so that it can be bolted onto the bracket and then onto the exhaust manifold. Here is another large chunk of the expense which went into this machine, the clutch, the electromagnetic clutch for engaging the cutting deck. But it was a necessity, since the previous one was rotten. We have just a few more decals to apply to the bonnet. Again, this bonnet did have to be sourced. It is a used bonnet, but it is in fairly good shape. On it goes. In goes a brand new UASA battery. I'm going to connect it all up, put oil in, put fuel in, and this will be our very first start of the engine since reassembly. Okay, here we go, fingers crossed. That is fantastic news. It is just so satisfying to hear it run after all the hours of work that I've put into it. Anyway, the deck is back from powder coating. Let's get that reassembled. Just giving the spindles a quick clean and a paint, then we can reassemble them with new bearings, and then the rest of the deck can be rebuilt as well. The deck is finished, which means that everything is now done on the machine. Once the deck has been fitted, we're going to go and mow some grass. And hopefully it's going to be a very successful end to an extremely long and extremely expensive project. There is just one more question to answer. Can it mow? Let's go and find out. What a delight to use. Okay, let's finally run through what this actually cost. So the initial purchase price of the machine was £50, but I did have to spend £200 on a donor machine, which a lot of the parts came from, such as the rotten centre console and the bonnet. Powder coating is not cheap either, that came in at £700. Now I'm going to split the main costs into three categories: the general tractor, the engine and the deck. And all of the prices are sorted from cheapest to the most expensive. I'm not going to read them all out, just the parts which cost over £100, so the significant expenses. For the general tractor, hardware, which was about 100, I think it was actually a bit more, I couldn't exactly calculate it, but this is essentially things like all of the stainless bolts, which the machine is pretty much made from. So yeah, big expenses there. Stainless steel bolts are not cheap. The seat was £104.24p, the tyres were £148.80p, the steering quadrant was a crazy £167.52p, and the electric clutch, understandably because it is an expensive part, was £263.74p. The engine was rather expensive as well. Now the gasket set and the seals were £120. The connecting rods, that's two of them, were £161.30p. These were a bit unexpected. I didn't intend on replacing these initially. The piston assemblies, likewise, I did not intend on changing the entire piston, I just wanted the rings. But you couldn't. Officially, from genuine Briggs & Stratton, you could not change just the rings, you had to get the entire kit. That was £180 and 60p. And then finally, the last one here, the bushing seal kit. Do you remember it? It was the part that I had to make a tool for to drive out the roll pin. But yeah, basically it's just the bushing for the crankshaft. And I have no idea why just a simple bushing like this with a seal came to £221 and 46p. I did double check the price for this with a Briggs & Stratton dealer and they confirmed that's what it really should have been. And I'd already driven out the old one when I found out the price, so I was sort of committed to buying it. Anyway, as for the deck, there was nothing over £100. I guess you could have incorporated some of the powder coating cost into that, maybe that would have been £100 or £200 for the deck alone, but yeah, the blades were the most expensive part, coming in at £80. Not really too bad at all prices I would expect. So the project grand total was £3,404 and 89p. And I probably will never be touching a Countax again for a restoration because they are money pits. The parts are just far too expensive. Anyway, this is the end of the project. It really has been one massive job, but we're there. We're finally there at the end. And yes, I don't expect the video to really pay for itself. It depends if YouTube pick it up and distribute it to many people, but if not, I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. And to anybody who is supporting the channel through either Patreon or as a channel member, thank you so much to you, because without you it really would be difficult to undergo projects like this. And thank you to everybody else for watching and subscribing and liking the videos. Until the next one, see you again very soon. Bye for now.